Hello, my name is Garrett Rain. I'm the Safety and Security Coordinator for the Elizabethtown Area School District, and you are at the SD7 Radio Use 201 training. You should have maybe seen the 101 training, which was more techniques and etiquette in the use of a radio in general. In this time, we're going to talk about specifics of how to use the basic functions of this device. The model of this device is called SD7, so that's why we're here under that title. Let's just jump in and talk through some slides here as we talk about the radio a little bit. All right, as we noted that there's two trainings. There's a 101 training on theory and etiquette. If you haven't seen that, it would be good if you would watch that one, please. About 15 minutes long or so, but same length for this one, I hope. And then there's a part 2, which you're in. So if you're looking for the part 2, you're in the right place. All right, let's talk about the basic functions of this and what this is. This might not look like it, but this radio is really a computer, and it's really a cell phone. So it's a cell phone first, and then every cell phone is really a computer. And we think about how computers work. They have to boot up to get happy, and it takes time for them to boot up and get happy. This has a basic operating system, then it's run in Android, and then there's an app on top of it that allows for the push-to-talk functions to work, for the radio-esque functions to work. So if we power it off, it's going to take a little while to power it back on. That's why these things should be just left on. They should be charged on. And look in the bottom there, there's a charging port right there. Any USB-C connector will charge this either by the computer, or these came with chargers and charging cables. So if you need one, see your building administration to get a charger. All right. How does it work and what's it working on? It's working on the FirstNet network. FirstNet is a federally managed emergency responder data network. Voice is data, text is data, everything's data. It is managed and administered mostly by AT&T. There's even Motorola people and other people that provide functions within this FirstNet arena. And folks might worry, well, what happens if the cell phone towers go down? FirstNet has a particular chunk of bandwidth that has been reserved for FirstNet use. So AT&T has these chunks of bandwidth that are used for the AT&T customers. But then there's a special chunk of radio frequency bandwidth that these work on, and district cell phones that are FirstNet cell phones work on, that allow us to have reliable communications in an emergency. Even if AT&T people can't get on the network, we should, right? Is there ever some end of the world catastrophic kind of problem that can occur? Sure, but that could occur in various ways, like the power going out, and on a previous system that we had, and our repeaters are down, right? So everything has problems. There's always benefits and problems with any particular choice we make. I note on here that these devices can communicate on the internet by use of Wi-Fi, and you'd think that would be good, but it creates a problem when we take this thing outside and we want to use it near a building, chasing an eloping student, or we're out in the bus loop, and it's now confused between the wireless signal and the cellular signal. If you see on the display that there's an indication that it's connecting to the Wi-Fi, and there's that universal Wi-Fi logo that you would see on there, please report this to your building administrator, and they'll report it to me, and then we'll take actions to make sure that this device is not on Wi-Fi. And you should not seek to put it on Wi-Fi, because then it would be less effective. We've made protective actions within the school district to install FirstNet cell phone boosters all around the buildings to make sure that there is FirstNet cellular signal within the buildings. If you likewise find a hole that I missed, please let your building administrator know, and then we can investigate and see why we may not have coverage in that particular area. But I've tested the buildings, and I've not found any holes in any of the buildings at this particular time. All right, let's move on. All right, you've been handed this device. You go, I have no idea how to use it. I don't know if it's on. I don't know if it's working. The first the first confusion that people have when they utilize the radio is they'd see this dial and they think it's a power turn-on dial. Nope. It's to change the talk group dial. We'll talk about that a little bit more. It's get into the menu dial. We'll talk about that at a high level a little bit more, but not right now. But how do I know whether and what this thing is doing and whether it's on and working? Because often what you're going to end up seeing is this. What do you see? Nothing. Why? It's saving power. That's why. If the display was working all the time, it would consume the battery life. These things have very good battery life. You should be able to get a day, maybe even 2 days. But I wouldn't risk it. I would charge it every night. And if you're not using it, charge it. But you should always have it on your person if you're assigned this, because if you get up in the middle of an emergency and it's not on your person, you won't have it with you, and you need to have it with you. So what do you do? How do you find out what it's doing? Well, if you look on the side of the radio over here, there's 2 buttons. There's a big red one that says SOS. It does nothing. It could, but I've not seen that the function would be very useful. So you can push this all you want and nothing will happen. If you push it in the middle of an emergency thinking something will happen, nothing will happen. Do not rely on this or use this for anything. If you need help, push on the push to talk, push, wait for the happy beat, talk, and then call for help. All right, but how do I know what it's doing? Well, the answer to that question is that you see over here that underneath the SOS button is the power button. A long press of the power button will power it off, or if it's powered off, it'll turn it on. We'll talk about that at the end because I don't want to power it off now because it'll take a while to boot up and I'd be wasting the training time. A momentary touch, and watch what happens. You know, you're seeing the display right now. A momentary touch to the power button toggles the display off or on. In this case off, in this case on. And you could probably hear how long I'm pushing for the little clicky sound. That's what turns it on and what turns it off. Now, how do I know what volume it's at? Well, that's a good question that you ask. If this isn't the volume dial, where's the volume? Well, the volumes are underneath the push to talk buttons right here where you see the little up rocker and the little down rocker. And I'll push on that, but it still didn't do anything, right? Because the display is asleep. If you want to see the display, momentary touch to the power button, and now look what happens when I click on the volume. You'll see that it's going up or it's going down. So now the volume's going up. It's at about half volume right now. That is phenomenally loud. In most environments, you will not need it that loud. I normally have it on the third little block, 3 levels up from bass. But you can push this thing all the way down and it says no call alert. In other words, you won't hear nothing. It's working, but you can't hear it. Well, excuse me, please. I have a friend who keeps texting me when I'm in the middle of creating a recording. You know, that's inconvenient. All right. All right. We talked about the power. We talked about how to get unstuck. Let's move on. How to change talk groups. Let's think about the whole other point. Do I even need the change talk groups? For most of you folks, the answer will be no, because your building will be assigned a chunk of radios. Those radios will be set up to work on your building's zone. We'll talk about zones in just a moment. And it'll be set to talk on the talk group. And that shouldn't say scan. It should say how to change talk groups. And I'm not doing this again because we're trying to get something out in the moment before you folks get into the new school year. All right. You don't need to go changing the talk groups, but if you do need to change a talk group because you've been directed to do so, right? We should always follow our directions. Is that we just turn this dial.
Channel 14, TAC 2.
And notice something that happens. The display changes and it also does a channel announcement. That can be seen as irritating because, especially if you're turning the dial a lot.
Channel 2, Athletic 1.
See, hear all that, right? But if you're wearing it and you bump it accidentally,
Channel 1, Administrators.
and you found out now you're not on the talk group you really
Channel
need to be
16,
on,
TAC 4.
then it's really helpful
Channel 15,
to have that
TAC
annoying channel announced.
3. Channel 14, TAC 2. Channel 13, TAC 1.
Now I know where I wanted to be for this demonstration, right? If you go away from your what's called a hailing channel, your building channel, then you're going to miss that radio traffic most likely because you're not going to have scan on, which then takes us to the other topic that we're going to look at. How do I know if scan is on my radio? For most folks, again, you don't need to scan. You're going to be using this pretty much as a basic walkie-talkie. It's going to be on your building channel, and then you leave it on your building channel, and then when you need to talk, you push to talk, you wait for the happy beep, you talk. When you're done talking, you release the button, and you're done. And the other person talks to you. Talk about, if we want to discuss etiquette, go watch the other video, right? But if there is some extraordinary need and you are directed to do so, here's how you do it. When this dial changes the talk groups, it also gets us into the menu. And we get into the menu by pushing down, and then you see that SIATA SD7 scrolling by the screen. That's telling you that you are in the menu mode, right? And if you turn 2 clicks counterclockwise, you see a PPT, press to talk. Underneath that menu heading, you press down again, and then you see something strange, and I have it on a text over here to help you, where it says scan, click to on. That means that scan is off, and if you push down, it turns it to on. Likewise, when I toggle it the other way, of course, it now decided to. Now it says click to off, which means scan is on. For most folks, you're going to be in the scan click to on, which means that scan is off. Now, hopefully I haven't thoroughly confused everybody. You just have to think it's the opposite because it's telling you where you're going to go if you push the button, not where you are. Now, if I had my druthers, there would be a note on the display telling us that scan is on or scan is off. Right? How do I get out of the menu? Because now we've gotten into the menu and now we don't know what to do. Right? Now I'm going to get into the menu. Sometimes it can take, I'm stuck in the loop here with oh no, I'm stuck. What do I do? How do I get unstuck? I'm so confused. I'm panicking. How do we get unconfused? Momentary touch to the display. You push it again, you're out, right? That's the short answer. Is if you, however you get befuddled, it may take several momentary touches to toggle you out, but that'll get you out of wherever you are and you're back to normal radio use. But if you do get into here, into the SIATA menu, if you turn the dial, it depends on where you are in the dial, how quickly you get to that, you'll see an exit. Wonder what that does. Exit. Push down. Guess what? You're now out of the menu. And it will be telling you the date and time and signal strength and that kind of information, right? Also, if you get in the menu and you just leave it alone, sooner or later it's just going to time out and it's going to pop out of the menu all by itself. Okay? So don't get panicked if you get stuck into the menu. Not a big deal. Because then if you then still need to talk, you just push to talk, that pulls you out of the menu too. All right? So there's more than one way. Now let's talk about zones for a moment. And we'll explain what zones are a little bit more when you see this, what's called a fleet map in a coming slide. But let's just talk about what that means. 99.99999% of the times, you will not need to change zones. But it's important to know when you might need to change zones or be told to go change zones, which would be really the driving point, especially for most staff, right? Administrators are the ones making that kind of decision. We have an emergency event at ABC School. I'm not going to name a school. And you don't work at ABC School. You work at a different school in the district. And they're having an emergency event and they need additional help. And you've been directed to go over to ABC School and provide them assistance. Let's pretend they had some sort of an event that required them to evacuate. They had to go to a reunification, or one of our reunification sites, and they need you to help with parent-student reunification. Well, we want to make sure that you have the ability to communicate with all the people engaged in that activity for ABC School. So then you would go into the menu, or you or somebody else or others would be directed to go into the menu and change to the ABC School zone so that you would have their tapestry or options of radio channels, because one chunk of you may be on a different talk group and another chunk on a different talk group based off of what functions you're going to be providing in this unusual event. Right? So I've hopefully explained why and how you may need to change zones. The change zones is just getting into the menu. How do you get into the menu? Which you don't really need to do unless you're told to do so. You push down. You may take a couple pushes, in this case 3, for it to see the SIATA SD7 scrolling by. And one click clockwise takes us to something that says zones. Wow, what do you know? And I push down again. It says zone 1, which is the zone that this radio is in. I turn it one click to the right, and guess what? I'm in zone 2. I push down.
Channel 1, EASD all call.
I'll explain what that is a little bit later. But I just changed zones, right? How do I change back? Let's pretend I get out of the menu because time has passed. Push down until you see the SIATA scrolling by. One click to the right until you see zones. Push down. I give it one turn to the left to zone 1. Push down again.
Channel 13, TAC 1.
That's it. Right? That's how zones are changed. But most of the time, you're not going to need to do that. This is an exceptional event that you would need to change zones. So let's talk through this fancy word called fleet map. It's how are the radios programmed? What zones are going to be in the radios? They're currently in the process of being reprogrammed so that they will reflect something like this. And it could, if they're watching this a year or two from now, this was recorded in 2024. This is for the 2024-25 school year where we introduced the use of these radios. It could look differently. So this could be a concept-based imagery. You can see each one of the schools has their own zone. And you can see as you look at the various zones, we'll take Bainbridge as an example, we'll look there, is that in that zone, the first talk group channel on the dial is going to be Bainbridge 1 and Bainbridge, and there's a one little asterisk after that. That's to communicate to the people who are programming this stuff that this is a scannable channel. And this is something more administrators or other more power users will use, not the basic user. You also see in that talk group, there's a Bainbridge TAC 1 and 2, likewise a Bear Creek TAC 1 and 2, East High, and so forth, right? Things get more complicated in high school, middle school complex. It's just the way the nature of the complex is. And then there, in all of the talk groups, all of the zones, there are 4 common TACs. TAC stands for Talk Around Channel. It's used for a specific group of people assigned to a specific task so that they can do the work that's necessary and coordinate in accomplishing those tasks, right? We also see something very curious down at the bottom here. This isn't really going to display on your radios. It's there for the programming people to know that it exists, and it will reside within the radio. Persons like myself and the building administrators have an ability that you noticed when I changed to zone 2 on this radio. It's an ability to do what's called an all-device all-call. in the break glass in case of emergency, phenomenally risky but rare event that we need to communicate with everyone in the district, regardless of what talk group they're in and regardless of what zone they are in and whether they have scan on or scan off. Myself and others within the district have the ability to create a broadcast radio call, one-way call, you can't call back, to every device telling you we have a phenomenally unusual event. And then you would be given specific directions on what is necessary for what people are to do in this phenomenally unusual event, and what talk groups or zones or radio channels they would need to go to do what they needed to do. Right? It's think about the emergency alert tones that you get on your radio and on your TV and on your cell phones. It's that kind of function. We have a similar one of those for the buses as well. But the buses also have a separate programming. Administrators will have the ability to communicate with the buses, but the buses will not have our talk groups, so they will not hear our radio traffic. So you can be assured of that as well. Now, this comes to sort of daily use protocol kinds of things. We have a fleet map that's assigned. There are building talk groups that are assigned by zones for each building. How the administrators choose to utilize the talk groups in their building's zone is up to the building administrators. It is not my place to give you direction on how they are going to utilize that. I can give you some generalized concept of what is likely to occur. And we've already spoken about that a little bit, in the fact that people will be mostly on your building channel number 1 on your fleet map talk group. It'll be the name of your building. Bainbridge for Bainbridge, Bear Creek for Bear Creek, East High for East High, high school for high school, and middle school for middle school. Things can get a little more complicated, in particular the high school, middle school. So high school, middle school staff attend to the direction of your building administration, and in particular Eric Byler, who is taking we're partners in the safety security element of the high school, middle school world, and more from the administrator perspective, and also mine from the safety security perspective. But he will be guiding that effort, and then you would be speaking with him about that. Other folks, the folks at Bear Creek, your building administration, East High, your building administration, and Bainbridge, your building administration. Those are the folks that you would need to consult with. There's also a note on here at the time of this recording. The maintenance custodial people are going to be using TAC 4 as their normal daily operation. So the folks who are working in the offices, this is particularly true in the high school, middle school complex. It may be different, again, at Bainbridge, and different at East High, and different at Bear Creek. But in the high school, middle school complex, all of the high custodial people and all the district administrative people, maintenance people, are going to be using TAC 4 as their more or less daily district-wide radio channel, because it doesn't matter where you are. I didn't note this. Where you are geographically does not matter. If you accidentally take this on the plane with you to Hawaii and you were able to hit the FirstNet radio system, which I'm sure works in Hawaii, or at least most of it, you would be able to communicate. But don't do that. Leave it here. It's your vacation. You shouldn't be taking the radio with you. All right? So, as long as you're on the network, and you've got communications. How do I change the battery? I promised that, and we've now gotten to that part, which is functionally the last part. So I appreciate your patience. So when we look at the steps that are necessary, I thought I got rid of all the animations. I did not. Silly me. You should be receiving the radio in one of these types of holders. The holders are very secure, which means they are difficult to remove. There's a particular technique that I have found that is effective for me, but some folks just can't seem to get it. So find someone who can if you really need to do this. right? And like we said, it's probably unlikely that you're going to need to change the battery, but just in case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the view so you can get a better view of this from here. Oh, look, isn't that better? I hold it with my left hand, 2 fingers down here, thumb up here. I'm peeling this away. See how it's going away? And then I peel it out like a banana. It's more technique than it is strength, but it does take some hand strength because I'm pushing up, pulling back. So it requires, some dexterity and fine motor detail stuff, right? If you look at the back, guess what? See these little knobs right here on the back? Those are required to be squeezed in to peel this out. It is not easy, and I've done this a lot. And you're going to watch me struggle as I try to get I got it the second time. I got my fingers in. This is the battery. If you need to change the battery, you take this one off, and then you put the new one on. And then it can go back into its carrier, holster, scabbard, whatever you want to, whichever title you would like to give to this, right? But what's wrong now? We pulled the power. What's that mean? It's not working, right? So how do we power it up? Push on the power button. I'm going to put this over by the microphone because you're going to hear something. Hopefully you heard, and if you're holding it, you would feel a vibration. And then you're going to see the Sciata logo come on the screen. And it's going to take a while for it to boot up and get happy. Hence the reason that we just should leave them on and charge them on. Okay? Let's look at the slides as we close out. Power on, long hold of power button. Leave the radio on, charge while on. Let's look at our close and recap. We looked at how to wake up the radio. How do we do that? Remember? Come on, you've got to remember now. The momentary touch to the power button. Momentary touch. Oh.
Channel 13, TAC 1.
It was getting happy. Now it's happy. Momentary touch to the power button toggles the display on or toggles the display off. We talked about how to change talk groups. That's with this dial up here, but most people will not need to do that, and you shouldn't do it unless you're directed to do so. We talked about how to use scan, but most people will not need to, so you only do so as directed. How to change zones. We've talked about how to change zones. That's the break glass in case of emergency. Some people have got to go and help another school due to their particularly most unique emergency event. We've also talked about how to change the battery. And again, most of these how-tos, most people won't have to know how to do. The primary thing that you just need to know how to do is double check that you're on the right talk group. And how do you do that? Well, you touch the display and then you'll see what talk group you're on. And as you ask your administrator, what talk group am I supposed to be on? And they should say you should be on XYZ. Well, that's where you turn the dial and you leave it. You will then have to maybe adjust the volume based upon the noise level in your environment. We talked about that in a previous video. Those are the primary functions that you really have to be concerned with in the use of the radio. Oh, I guess I should get to the thank you screen. Thank you for attending, and I hope you found this information useful. And happy radioing. All right. Goodbye, and have a great day.